Have you ever wondered if God is trying to get your attention in ways you're not noticing? You may be expecting to hear from Him through a loud voice or a powerful sign, but sometimes His communication is subtle. Often we are so caught up in our daily routines and distractions that we overlook the ways He reaches out to us. Today, I'm going to reveal 7 unexpected ways God might be speaking to you right now, ways you may not even realize are happening. In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to miss God's signs. Whether you're seeking clarity in a relationship, your career, or even your spiritual journey, God often speaks in ways we don't expect. I've experienced this firsthand. There was a time in my life when I felt distant from God, frustrated because I wasn't hearing from Him. I prayed, I waited, but it seemed like silence. It wasn't until I slowed down and reflected that I realized God had been communicating all along, just not in the way I was looking for. I want to share that experience with you and help you uncover those hidden signs, so you won't miss them again. Number 1. Through delays and setbacks. How often have you faced a delay or setback and thought, why is this happening to me? Whether it's a job you didn't get, a relationship that didn't work out, or an opportunity that passed you by, these moments of disappointment can feel like roadblocks. But what if I told you that sometimes God uses these delays to get your attention? Delays can be frustrating, but they are often moments when God is asking you to trust His timing. We see this clearly in the story of Joseph in the Bible. Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers and then, later wrongfully imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. Imagine the setbacks he must have felt. Years spent in a prison cell wondering where God was in all of it. But in reality, God was using those setbacks to prepare Joseph for a greater role. By the time Joseph was elevated to a position of power in Egypt, it was clear that each delay had been part of God's divine plan to save an entire nation from famine. In your life, those delays and setbacks might be the very thing God is using to reposition you for something better. Maybe you didn't get the job because there's a better opportunity around the corner. Or perhaps that relationship didn't work out because God is preparing someone else for you who is more aligned with His purpose for your life. If you look at your setbacks not as failures but as moments to pause and trust, you'll begin to see God's hand in them. Number 2. Through dreams. Another unexpected way that God communicates is through dreams. We see throughout the Bible that dreams were often used as a method of divine revelation. Think about Daniel, Joseph, the father of Jesus, and even the Magi who were warned in a dream not to return to Herod after visiting baby Jesus. Dreams can be a powerful way for God to speak when we're asleep because our minds are quiet, free from distractions. I once met a man who shared an incredible story about how God spoke to him through a dream. He was at a crossroads in his life, unsure of which direction to take with his career. One night he had a dream where he saw himself standing in front of 2 doors. One was dark and filled with shadows, while the other was brightly lit. He felt a clear prompting in the dream to choose the lit door. When he woke up, he felt an overwhelming peace about a decision he'd been wrestling with for weeks, and he knew God had used that dream to guide him. Perhaps God has spoken to you in a dream, but you dismissed it as random or meaningless. Take a moment to reflect on your dreams. Could God be using them to communicate something important to you? Pay attention to the themes and emotions in your dreams. They could be His way of revealing His will for your life. Number 3. Through people we least expect. One of the most unexpected ways God gets our attention is through people. Often we expect God to speak through a pastor, a spiritual leader, or someone who seems qualified to give us divine guidance. But what if God is speaking to you through someone you wouldn't normally listen to? There's a story of a man who had been struggling with an important decision about moving to a new city. He had prayed for guidance, but nothing seemed to happen. One day he was sitting at a cafe when a stranger sat down next to him. They struck up a conversation, and out of nowhere the stranger said, "You know, I moved to a new city once. It was the best decision I ever made." The man was stunned. It was the answer to the very question he had been praying about. God had used a complete stranger to give him the direction he needed. This reminds me of Balaam's story in the Bible, where God even used a donkey to get Balaam's attention. If God can use a donkey, He can certainly use anyone around you to deliver a message. The key is to remain open and listen. Sometimes, the people we least expect can offer the greatest insights into God's plans for our lives. Number 4. Through a strong sense of discomfort. Have you ever felt a nagging discomfort? A sense that something isn't right, but you can't put your finger on it? This could be God's way of getting your attention. Discomfort can be a powerful motivator for change. Sometimes God allows us to feel uneasy because He's trying to redirect us. I remember feeling this way in my own life when I was stuck in a job that no longer fulfilled me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't where I was supposed to be. The discomfort grew until I finally prayed and asked God for clarity. That's when opportunities I hadn't even considered began to open up. And I realized that God had been using that discomfort to push me into something new. He was nudging me toward a path that was more aligned with His purpose for me. If you're feeling unsettled or uncomfortable in a situation, don't ignore it. Ask God if He's trying to show you something through that feeling. Sometimes discomfort is His way of saying, it's time for a change. Number 5. Through silence. Silence can be one of the most challenging ways that God gets our attention. We often expect immediate answers to our prayers or a clear sign that points us in the right direction. But sometimes God chooses to be silent, not because He isn't listening, but because He wants us to grow in trust and patience. Consider the story of Elijah. After his great victory over the prophets of Baal, Elijah fled to the wilderness where he felt abandoned and alone. He expected to hear from God in a dramatic way, but instead God spoke to him in a gentle whisper. It was in the silence that Elijah found the comfort and guidance he needed. If you're experiencing a season of silence, don't be discouraged. Sometimes God is quiet because He's waiting for the right moment to reveal His plan. Use this time to deepen your faith, trusting that He is with you even when you don't hear His voice. Number 6. Through repeated messages. Have you ever noticed a particular theme, verse, or message keeps coming up in your life? Whether in conversations, things you read, or even sermons, this could be God trying to get your attention through repetition. He often uses repeated messages to emphasize something important. Think about it. When we're too distracted or hesitant, God might send the same message in multiple ways until we finally listen. I remember a time when I was considering a big decision, but I wasn't sure if it was the right path. Over the span of 2 weeks, I kept encountering the same Bible verse everywhere I went. Friends mentioned it in passing. It was the focus of the sermon at church, and I even stumbled upon it in a book I was reading. That verse was God's way of confirming His direction for me. Pay attention to recurring messages in your life. They could be God's way of guiding you toward His will. Number 7. Through nature. Another surprising way God speaks is through the natural world around us. The Bible says in Psalm 19:1, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of His hands." God's creation is filled with reminders of His presence, power, and love. Sometimes we get so caught up in our daily tasks that we forget to pause and notice the beauty and wonder that surrounds us. There's a story of a woman who was going through a difficult time, feeling completely overwhelmed by her struggles. One morning, she decided to take a walk by a lake to clear her mind. As she walked, she noticed a small bird perched on a branch, singing joyfully despite the cold. In that moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace, as if God was telling her to trust Him and find joy even in the middle of her storms. Nature had become a powerful reminder of God's care and presence in her life. When you find yourself feeling disconnected from God, step outside. Look at the trees, the sky, or even the smallest details of nature. They might be God's way of reminding you that He is near and that He holds everything in His hands. Now that you know these 7 unexpected ways God might be speaking to you, take a moment to reflect. Have you experienced any of these signs in your own life? How has God communicated with you through delays, discomfort, dreams, or even nature? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how God is working in your life. If this message has blessed you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more spiritual insights, and share this with someone who may need to hear it. Let's continue this journey of faith together, seeking God's voice in the most unexpected places.